Afternoon, good evening. Welcome to this webinar session. I'm Tony Schönenberger. I'm the Executive Chairman of STARS. I'm pleased to inform you that STARS is preparing two symposia in Singapore and in Switzerland. And in addition to that, also a study tour to China, to Shenzhen and Guangzhou. And the title of that study tour is Breaking Traditions, Learning from Global Champions, Unicorns and Startups. Please visit our website for more information. Now, no doubt, geopolitical, geoeconomic and geotechnological intelligence is a must for any leader in business and society. So today, we are continuing our webinar series on China, from Copycat China to Innovation China. And today we have the great privilege to talk to Virginia CHEUNG. Welcome, Virginia. Great to have you on this webinar session.
Thank you, Tony. Thanks for having me.
Virginia is the director for China at the Peter F. Drucker School of Management in LA. And she's also a former associate researcher at Shenzhen University. Virginia specializes in integrating West and East, bridging Peter Drucker's management principles and Confucianism. She also held leadership roles at Siemens in Germany and has served on the boards of Chinese high-tech startups. So, Virginia, our expectations are pretty high, and we are very much looking forward to your insights. Now we have approximately 30 minutes to discuss with Virginia. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature below and type in your question. And again, I encourage all of you to do it as quickly as possible because we will be running out of time very, very quickly. Now, Virginia, first question on leadership, actually. What are your major conclusions regarding Western and Eastern management philosophies, how to bridge Peter Drucker's management principles and Confucianism?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. That's my research focus. So yeah, many people, when they talk about Peter Drucker and Confucius, there was what's the point between them? Why there's two? My mentor used to say, okay, there's one obvious similarities between these two. Guess what? Because they are both old. Like Peter Drucker is old and Confucius is even older. But what makes them together? There are lots of things in between as well. First of all, Peter Drucker, he's the father of modern management, but he didn't really invent management. He was putting up the management theories, concepts from economics, philosophies, psychologies, histories, and different disciplinaries, and put it together into studies called management study as we study today. So from my school, Drucker's School of Management, we're very proud. We're not like a typical business school. We're a management school that we focus on management. And in Confucius, ancient time, people would think was there management study? For sure, there was not, but there was management. The society was actually undermanaged, and at the time in Confucius' time, the society was managed into different levels, like the individual first, and then you manage your family, and then you manage a society, right? And in Drucker's modern world, what we do, we manage oneself first, and then you manage your team, you manage your business, and we put it together into managing organization. And then on the top of it is also management in society. So if you look at that, the Confucius different levels of management and the Drucker's different levels of management is very much aligned. It's just we in Asia we used family instead of organization in today's world. Right. But what makes these two scholars very interestingly together is they both focus on the toppest level of management, basically society. And Drucker makes it he terms it as functioning society, And Confucius, many people know, we call it harmonious society. Right. And because they focus on the highest level of management instead of just what you do in your family, what you do in your organization, they really highlight on values. And in China, we call it virtues, right? Drucker said values is the most important to organization as vitamin to human body. And Confucius like, oh, everyone have to do self-cultivation, right? Like this is the Chinese version of self-management. And then you can help to manage your family and manage your society. So everything else is talking about like the values and the virtues, and both of them focus very much on human spirit, and that's what makes structure really relevant today. And even the Confucius in the society today, although like even in China, many people, we don't talk about Confucius all the time, but it's still relevant. It's in our blood because both of them focus on human spirit. And in AI era, like now, when everyone's talking about machines like robots and AIs, what comes to the end is the human being. So that makes these two scholars and their thinking are still classic, and that is still relevant to today. And of course, when you talk about like humans, you think about teamwork, right? Because you need to put these humans together to work productive. And maybe sometimes they use tools like AI, right? But most of the time it's like the management between the human beings. And of course, in the West, many people think, oh, we talk about individualism. But Drucker thinks like, okay, you need to focus on alignment between individual interest and organizational interest. He respects different interests, but he talks about alignment. And in Confucianism, many people know us as collective culture. Yes, in the ancient time, we think about like, okay, the organizational or family interest or overall the bigger interest comes before your individual interest. And even if you have to do sacrifice, you have to do it because the overall interest comes first. So that's a little bit different, but in general, both of them focus on like like teamwork to make it effective. So what that makes like those similarities, as we just said, they focus on society, they focus on human being, they focus on values, virtues. Those similarities make structure is actually very easy to be accepted in Eastern cultures. Like Drucker is very influential in Japan, especially in the 80s when the Japanese economy was booming, and it's very easy to be accepted by Chinese. But for the longest time, Drucker was not a mainstream in Europe, in America, in modern management, even if he's the father, but his focus and the way of his research is now like natural science way. So some of the scholars don't really accept Drucker, especially in the ancient time. Like Drucker is old, but not that old. Like at the beginning of the Europe, like when our natural science was developed, Drucker's idea was not really popular at the time. So that comes down, connects to our theme today. Like, why those our cultural roots and the ancient wisdom, how that affected us to develop our technologies, our science today. Because in the, think about it in Asian, in Confucianism, in the Eastern culture, we talk about like harmony a lot. We think about like, okay, human beings should be harmonized. Human beings and the earth, the environment should be harmonized, right? So our culture, we focus a lot on humanity studies. We didn't really focus that much on science because we think it should be a harmonious world. Like we shouldn't destroy the world. We go with it, right? But then in the Roman time, I'm not saying the development of natural science is to destroy the world, but it's actually when we see the natural disasters, when we see like different things in the world that we cannot explain, we develop physics, we develop chemistries, we develop like those engineering things to actually help us to improve the world, right? And those advancement of technology for sure improves our lives, our living standard, much better than in the old days than our parents' generation. But on the other hand, when we look back, today we have the topic of sustainability, of ESG. This is because we human beings, we realize the development of natural science, of technology is not absolutely a good thing. It also destroys the world, the earth, the environment we live in, right? So that's somehow coming back to the ESG and the CSR concept. And that again, if you look back, it connects to Confucianism, it connects back to Drucker's like a human spirit, right?
Mm.
So in the history, because of the Easterner culture, nature science was not our focus. But I think today China is catching up on nature science. But then what's in Confucianism, the ancient wisdom, and what's in Peter Drucker, the human spirit, will just like shine again. It really leads the direction for the future development, including the technical development. Yeah. So
Okay.
that's how I view the two so-called East and the West like school of thoughts, the overlaps and the dissimilarities, and how that affect us and our science, our technical development today. Yeah.
Great. So this is, I believe, an excellent basis for our discussion on innovation. And I have the privilege to ask a few questions on that topic too. First one would be, Virginia, China wants a copycat economy. Now China is a center of innovation. I mean, you mentioned that before. So you look at EVs, at biotech, at green tech, or at DeepSeek. Business leaders in the West acknowledge that they are the followers. Would you agree to that?
Let me share an interesting story that I just noticed today. There's a news in Britain, and the highlight is it right for King Charles to drive a car that is made in China? Something like that, right? Not exact. So the news is about like King Charles. He bought a Lotus car with a big amount of money. I can't remember how much, but the car was actually made in China. And then that comes to this story, like many Chinese was remembering like 100 years ago when the car was firstly invented. And then I can't remember, they put like a German made car or like an American made car and they sent it to the gifted to the royal family in China. It was Qing Dynasty at the time. So they were saying before the Chinese royal family was driving the European cars and Western cars, and now the royal family in England is driving like a Chinese EV. So yeah, it's very interesting. As a Chinese, I have to say I'm proud of it. Proud of the commercial success of many Chinese firms. But as a scholar, I really want to bring up this question to the audience today. So how do we define the leader and the follower? We need to break down a little bit because even if we have those products selling across the world, does it really mean we are the leaders? Is it led by the technical advancement or something behind it? Because if we ask Peter Drucker or Confucius, they will say, okay, what's behind the values of these products from customers' perspective? So say, for example, we know the big names like Huawei and BYD, as you mentioned, like they're all like selling across the world. But then in China, what build up was the core of our so-called copycat or innovative China is those OEMs and those SMEs in Shenzhen, in Zhejiang province, right? Those are the core strength. And they were very good at scaling up. We can call it, yes, copycat, but being able to scale it up to make a state-of-art technology accessible at a cheaper price, at a high quality at the same time, that is comparative advantage. It actually improves the living standard of our global consumers in Europe or in America, right? However, from the customer's perspective, because Drucker really focus on customers. So from customer's perspective, yes, I get some better features. I get better performance. That's so-called functional benefit. Does the European customers get a higher level of emotional benefit by driving a Chinese-made EV compared to if you were driving like a Volkswagen EV? That is, I think, yeah, another thing to say whether we are leading or not. Even if you mention like DeepSeek, that's another very great invention. Yes, I'm proud of it. But how many European audience today here in this webinar really use DeepSeek as your daily tool in your work? Why you prefer to use OpenAI or Cider or other AI tools? Because what's the core behind it is the values, the logic, the ethics, right? So I think, for Chinese to be the leader, we need to think about those values, ethics behind the product for us to really lead the world and the product development.
Okay. But in the context of today's tensions all over the place, including the tariff policies, how do you see the impact on innovation in the next couple of years?
So I think, tariff is one way, like a tool to set up a barrier for free trade. But for behind the physical goods, the flow of physical goods is actually the free flow of capital, of talents, of our wisdom, and of our culture. So I really think, deep to the problem is like whenever we can have like a free flow, free exchange of our spiritual thing, and then those tariff, those like a physical stuff on the top is now going to the real barrier. Why that? Because now if you only produce standard products, commercialized product, commodities, yeah, whichever is cheaper, better quality, people will buy it. But if you're buying from like a values point, self-expressive need, then price is no more your priority, a prioritized the consideration, right? So I think, the the technical development, I'm not engineer, but the technical development from our management scholars perspective, it should it should be led by your values behind your product. You need to tell the customers like why I designed this, how I designed this, what does it bring you emotionally, and then you can get away from those physical tariff barriers.
Another question maybe in this context, looking at innovation in the US and in Europe, innovation traditionally works through research at universities, then patents, then venture capital. Chinese innovation is, to my mind, is different, is applied, we call it market-driven. It's much faster, benefits from a powerhouse in engineering and obviously now in supply chain efficiency. Is this the major reason for the success of Chinese innovation?
I mean, this is a like great, great, great question. If we think about it, yeah, your observation is very, very, very accurate. But if we look back, being customer centric, where is this concept from? It's from modern management. It wasn't really from China. It was from the West, right? Especially the American companies. They were pioneer in this idea. And back in maybe last century, about like the 60s, 70s, when the European market was growing really fast, like the European companies were very customer centric as well. They were very applied, and which lead their innovation goes really fast. It was growing as fast as China today, and maybe even faster at the time, right? And why it slows down? It was also because when the market slows down, and then the European gens, one of the reasons that they're already in comfort zone, they're already grown up. And then the second is like, okay, the market's going slower. I don't need to innovate that fast to match the market need, right? So they're less motivated. But Drucker said, you need to look at the customers, what they don't know. So customers don't, he thinks like a Drucker thinks like customers don't always know what they want. Like I wouldn't know I need an iPhone until you gave me, I was satisfied with my Nokia, right? So the companies, you need to be very sensitive and lead the customer need rather than just what you have there for them. So when the company like growth, when the market like growth, and then like the company need to use their innovation to lead the company, lead the customer demand to grow, right? So the one thing is like I think the Western companies like you need to be more sensitive on customer need instead of just put your head into universities. And then on the other hand, is there any problem with the Chinese market-driven innovation? Yes, that lead to the phenomenon of so-called copycat. And why that? It's because like back in the 1960s, one team in Stanford called Stanford Research Institute, they invented a concept called Valley of Death to describe this phenomenon. They were saying, okay, now you have like a basic research, which is very much focused in Europe and in America, which happens in university. And then you have like commercialization, right? That is on the market side is the two end. But between this, what you would bridge that is from the basic research, you have applied research and you have prototype, and then you have the commercialization, right? But then what's in the middle are missing. No one's like inventing in prototyping in applied research. And then the two ends don't talk to each other. You need to have the university know what the market needs, and then the university need to know like, and then the market needs to know what basic research is there, and then that can help me with my product advancement. So basically, the solution from Stanford was they were saying, okay, we need to bridge these different phases of innovation. And then the second is to make this bridge happen and go smooth. You need to have like an interdisciplinary team. You need to have engineers and like commercial people together as one team working together, right? It sounds very right to us today. It sounds very normal, right? But it was actually a concept back in 1960s already.
Mhm. Can you elaborate a
So
little bit on why the West didn't really see this development?
mm, I don't think the Westerners don't really see this bridge because if you think about the Stanford team, they already raised this concept
Mm.
in last century. They realized the problem, but they didn't really solve it. It was because the economic or the market growth was shifting from Europe to emerging countries. And the big giants, as I said earlier, get less sensitive to lead market demand, to really identify customer insights. And that's one critical reason. Another critical reason, I don't know I'm right, but my observation through my talk, my interviews with some European companies is if we think backwards, again to last century, back in 1960s, when Europe was developing really fast, when I was working for European companies, we had lots of innovations, cutting edge technologies in our stock. We're just not putting in the market. Why that? Because for example, take an example. I already have a third generation of products of systems, but I want to prolong the life cycle of my first generation, second generation. I want to maximize the profit return from that. I want to use them to make more money. But then at the same time, you don't think about like, okay, yeah, you are still selling your first generation, second generation, but China and other emerging countries, they're already working on the third generation. And then you lose opportunity. So I think in today's world, you really have to run faster. Like just give the market what you have, like what the best you have. Don't wait. Don't try to make the maximize profit from your previous technologies and lead the market. And that's the only way to be the leaders in the market, as you said. Otherwise, you become the follower. Right?
We are running out of time. I have a last question. Perhaps you could summarize and perhaps also look a little bit into the future. How does China's innovation ecosystem compare to Silicon Valley and also to Europe? And if you look at the next couple of years, perhaps.
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting question. And that comes back to the culture thing as well. So if you think about like Silicon Valley, people think about more individual. Like it's more like you need to have like a individual heroes, right? In Netflix, in Apple, they want the best people. But in China, as we said, we focus more like on collectivism. We need to have like a good team together. So when you come about like when you talk about ecosystem, that's about partnership. That's about win-win. So maybe collectivism can be one advantage in forming a healthy ecosystem. However, it can be led by individual heroes. So it's like two ways of going there. I don't know which way is more effective in AI era, but there are clearly two ways.
Great. Virginia, we have to come to an end, unfortunately. First, I want to thank you very much for your brilliant insights. We are facing disruptions all over, so even disruptors get disrupted. And the message, I believe, is quite clear. Expect the unexpected. So thank you very much again. We wish you all the best. And we are very much looking forward to having you again in Singapore and in Shenzhen next week and the week after next. Thank you very much again.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. Thank you, everyone. Time really flies. Looking forward to see you all in Singapore. Yeah.
Great. We are continuing this webinar series after the summer break, and we shall keep you posted. Goodbye for now. Wishing you a relaxing summer break, and despite of all the disruptions all over the place. Thank you. Goodbye.
Okay. Thank you, Tony. Bye.